have often been in this question of what is a human being's highest potential? Like, what is like the ultimate pursuit that we are all after? And the answer that comes to me through my journey is selflessness.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?
Hi everyone, I'm Jason Balara and this is the Know Your Why podcast. Today I'm here with Max Stevens. He's a personal development coach, speaker, philosopher, and the author of What the Fuck Do You Really Want?, which I'm sure we're going to talk about here in this interview. Max, like I said, I'm gonna let you tell your story, but first I want to say thank you very much. Thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate the chance to get to know you, to hear more about you, and kind of just like I mentioned before we started recording, just have a great conversation. So thanks for being here today.
I appreciate you having me as well. So I'm looking forward to our conversation.
Awesome. Well, let's start with you. Let's start with kind of your background. What got you to where you are today, and then we'll go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was lucky / unfortunate that I grew up in a drug addicted household. And so that got me very interested in personal development, observing human behavior. I was quite heartbroken around feeling responsible in a lot of ways for my dad not being able to get clean and healthy when I was younger, which sort of got internalized as a belief, which took me years to articulate, which basically went something along the lines of, if my dad had really loved me, he would have been able to get healthy. And because he wasn't able to do that, I must not be lovable. And so when we look at like the studies around children of addicts, like generally they go in one of two directions. They will internalize that belief that they aren't lovable, and one of two things will happen. They'll either seek out the confirmation of that belief in their life and generally won't amount to much, etc., because they're looking for evidence to sort of confirm it, or they will sort of reject or attempt to reject that belief and do everything they can to disconfirm it. I was just lucky that I fell into the second category, so I became very interested in Western consumerist success because I had also a deeper sort of belief, which is if I could become successful enough, then I would have enough resources to always save my dad, and more to the point that he would turn and look at me and feel that I was worthy of his love and affection, and more to the point that I was worthy of him pursuing better health for himself. And so as I moved and started to become more interested and started to actually pursue that success, the thing that I sort of noticed is everyone, dare I say everyone, or as close to everyone as I could possibly say, that I was sort of looking up to was no happier than I was. And so that got me, that sort of left a sort of sliver of doubt in my mind about this pursuit that I was undertaking. I was lucky that at the end of my sort of high school, I went to India and I was doing some missionary work over there. And the story I often tell is that I met a homeless person on the side of the road who was in like a meditative position, and they were crying. And I stopped them and said, "Oh, listen, I'm so sorry. I don't speak the language. I just wanted to check if you're okay." And they opened their eyes and looked at me and said, "Yep, no, I'm completely fine. These are happy tears." And I went, "Oh, wow, you speak perfect English." And they said, "Yeah, I've traveled and been around." And I said, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. I was just checking you're okay. And they said, "Oh, no, I'm great. These are happy tears." And I said, "Oh, that's wonderful. Did you get good news, or, what happened? Why?" And they said, no. And I said, "So why are you so happy?" And they looked back at me and said, "Because I am." And so that put a big crack in my pursuit, because I was thinking to myself, well, this person is happier than I'll ever be. And yet already at 17, I have more than they ever will. And so that then got me more and more interested around my sort of, what would you call it, psychological architecture, more so than my external circumstances. And as I started to go deeper and deeper, thousands and thousands of hours into meditating and introspection and personal development, that belief that I just articulated before around my dad started to surface. And once it really surfaced, I was left with this belief sitting in front of me. If my dad had really loved me, he would have been able to get healthy. And I asked myself, I said, well, how do you know that that's true? And I started to investigate that belief, but really from an objective perspective. And I said to myself, I said, okay, let's be very, very clear about this. Your dad has struggled with this since long before you were born. So now that you're born and now that you're here, the idea that just because you're around, that must mean that he needs to be able to do certain things. It actually came off as quite an epistemically arrogant position. And I said to myself, well, okay, so if this wasn't true, then what would the implications of that be? And one of those implications, by default, is that I would be enough and I would be lovable. And in that moment, like a flash of lightning, it left me. And like my whole physiology changed. I could feel like my nervous system changing on the back of sort of seeing through this belief. Now, the reason why that got me into coaching is because it also became inescapably clear that a lot of the high performers that I was surrounded by at the time were doing the exact same thing, just in their own way. And so that then got me very, very interested around the sort of archetype of the high performer and how high performers are created and what do they struggle with and what their concerns are and what their emotional pain points are that they aren't conscious of. And that then moved me into personal development and coaching.
So much to unpack. So that the piece you talked about, like being the child of an addiction household, personally relevant to me as well. And I read a book, I don't know, a long time ago, but I think the title was something like "Adult Children of Alcoholics," or so something like very obvious, like what the book was about. But it paralleled exactly what you said, that there's essentially like there's only two choices basically in terms of what those children, what direction they go in, right? It's either like almost like follow in those footsteps, or sort of spend your life sort of rebelling against the way that you grew up, which is like an interesting way to look at it as a rebellion. But it's because most teenagers, kids that do go through some level of rebellion, and sometimes it's manifests in different ways. So I think that's just fascinating to me personally to hear you kind of echo that, and maybe that's common knowledge. I don't know, but I've read that one book, and now hearing you say it is just makes a lot of sense. The part about meeting that homeless person and them just like saying how do you why are you so happy? I just am. That's like that really struck me, and I don't even know exactly how to articulate what like the meaning behind just that story was for me. I don't even I think it's just extremely powerful to point out that happiness can be a decision that we make, and I think that is almost the a missed point in a lot of instances. You went on to talk about kind of these how high performers have these goals and all of that, and it sounds like maybe you don't think that it's coming from the right place, the right motivators. Like when you work with your coaching clients, I mean, I guess my take home is it seems like your perspective is maybe a little different than other coaches that we've had on the show, people that ones that I've worked with, and I'm really interested to kind of dive in more on that, just where you're how that is different in your mind.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the questions that would show up for me immediately when I start working with somebody, so just by way of example, right? Like if I'm working with a CEO and they come to me and they say, Max, I'd love to work with you because I'd love to double the size of the revenue in the company. And the first question out of my mouth is, well, why do you want that? So you could have asked me for anything, right? But you came to me with this particular challenge. And they might say something to the effect of, so I can prove to all those people who said that I couldn't do it, that I can. And I would say, well, don't you think about a use of our time as just forgiving those people? Because then you wouldn't have to do this at all. And so the thing that I'm sort of listening for, like Coaching 101 would basically tell us that whatever somebody brings to the work is not the problem. It's always like the symptom of something else. And so the thing that I'm sort of attempting to listen for is, what is this a symptom of? The challenge with the archetype of the high performer is that the high performer's journey is normally born of pain. It is born of pain, or it's born of a feeling of insignificance, that I don't feel significant. And so what happens for the high performer, by and large, is that they set out on this journey to become significant as a way of disconfirming this feeling that they have on the inside, that they are in fact not significant. And this is where like a lot of coaches will talk about like imposter syndrome, mindset, and all this sort of stuff, which by and large I don't agree with, right? And I'm happy to be challenged on that if you'd like to talk about that. But fundamentally, what they do is they go out on this journey. They go out on this journey to disconfirm a feeling of insignificance, and they say, if I can achieve X, whatever X is, then I will feel significant. What happens is X arrives, and then the feeling doesn't go away, but the goalposts recede, and so there's a new X that I now need to achieve. And so what ends up happening is that what the high performer is often caught in is that they're not able to grasp that the reason why they're caught in this game is because they are seeking an external outcome to heal an internal pain point. And that can never happen. And so my work fundamentally is like the first sort of piece of our work, assuming I have the permission of the client to do so, is actually to integrate those experiences in the first place. On the back end of integrating those experiences, the high performer still has all of this drive, skills, knowledge, experience, resources, connections, etc. But now we're actually in a position to really have impact in the world, because your journey is no longer about fixing yourself. It's now about expressing yourself in the world. And so the book and stuff, which we can talk a little bit about if you want as well, is about the process of doing that.
I feel like now I'm using this as my own personal coaching session, therapy session. What you said, I mean, a lot of times you hear about people that, want to prove other people wrong. They hear about, the haters and all of that, like, right. Success. You talked about, kind of that high achiever, the successful person. And I think it's in some examples, like the examples that we have out in the world, it seems like they probably do have haters. Like the example I'm thinking of is Tom Brady. I grew up in Massachusetts, like huge Tom Brady fan.
Yep.
Always talked about like the doubters, the people that didn't believe in him, and kind of him proving them wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something that I have often thought about for myself, in that I don't really know that I have had haters or doubters or anything, but somehow I still feel like I'm trying to prove somebody wrong. And I don't know. And what you said is, it's probably just me, or so, you know what I mean? Some internal feeling that it's like, I've actually had the thoughts like, maybe if I did have haters, I would be better. Like I would be, that would drive me even further to kind of achieve things and have that. And so it's like, when you said that you're trying to, use something external to fix something internal, they get like a light bulb moment, like, oh yeah, okay, all right, well that's because that's a me problem, not a outside world problem. And so it's just a fascinating, I guess, the way that you look at this, that I just have never heard articulated before. And I'm not sure that a lot of the coaching, and maybe it does, maybe it does come from that, but it's just a really interesting, and to me sort of unique perspective on that look. Where do you start with people? If it sounds like it's almost easy to know, okay, this is an internal problem, not an external problem, but like, how do you start adjusting that perspective of the people that you work with?
Well, the first place is to undermine. The first place is to ethically undermine the journey. So basically, I ran this workshop. It was like a digital conversation for, it was like 45 different CEOs that I had in a sort of Zoom space. And I said, just notice that when you all first started your businesses, you would have murdered somebody to be in the position that you're in now. And yet you're no happier than you were when you first started, right? And I would argue for some of you, you're actually worse. So, and all of you are going to object and say, yeah, Max, but you don't understand. That's only just because I haven't achieved this thing. But do you see the game that we're in? The game that we're in is like that we're in an ever receding problem. And the other thing that another way that we can sort of undermine the journey, right, is there's these, within the human psyche, we have what are called mimetic desires. So mimetic desires are desires that we have inherited. So in other words, they're not really ours, right? That's sort of where like the title of my book came from. What the fuck do you really want? Because it's the emphasis is on the word you. What do you really want? And so for example, right, if we look at people who are high performing, they generally are very results focused, goal focused, and success status stuff. That's generally like their sort of MO in terms of what they're pursuing. So if we go back and we look at our sort of evolutionary biology and we look at our history, what we find is that for tens, if not hundreds of thousands of years, our ancestors lived in tribes. And in those tribes, your quote unquote success was predicated upon the contribution that you made to said tribe. Did you go and get the berries? Did you go and catch the fish? Did you go and hunt the animal? And if you did, and you brought it back, you were celebrated within that tribe, right? And that was how you sort of measured your worth within said tribe. The problem that we have now is that we have 100,000 years of, not 100, maybe probably closer to 60,000. 60,000 years of evolutionary biology that is wired for connection, for contribution, for community. But in Western developed countries like you and I live in, Jace, we have built lives and cultures that are geared around the individual, that are not geared around the community. And so basically what that means is that we are now acting out and living to achieve goals that are out of alignment with our own biology. And so like this is the classic case of like the high performer who achieves a lot but still feels empty. Why do they feel empty? Because you're not intrinsically wired to live for you. You're actually intrinsically wired to live for others. And so what ends up happening is let me take a step back. So the basis of trade in terms of how we used to do business with each other was largely on the basis of utility. So Jace, you've got some eggs, I've got some sheepskin. Why don't we swap? I need the eggs, you need the sheepskin, you want to keep warm, I need some eggs, let's swap. What happened is after the Industrial Revolution is we had a surplus of goods. So we had more goods than what people needed. And so what happened was identity itself started to become commodified. So in other words, if you had one sheepskin and I now had two, that now meant something about me. And so as in it meant that I was of higher status than you because I had more stuff. I don't actually need both sheepskins, but it now meant that I was higher on the sort of social hierarchy than you if I had two, even though I only needed one. And so one of the things that I talk a lot about in the book is I say that the desires that you are seeking are not even yours. And you never actually, whenever we make like consumer purchase decisions, is you never actually buy the thing. What you buy is what owning that thing says about you to have it. So as an example, so let's take something like a luxury item, like a Gucci scarf, right? So if I buy that Gucci scarf, I'm not buying the fabric. I'm not buying it for the fabric. I'm buying it for the story of what it means about me to own it. Success, sophistication, elegance, etc. However, the problem is so that's really what I'm buying. I'm buying the story about that thing. I'm not buying the thing itself. The problem is that when next year's line is released, that scarf now no longer says elegance, sophistication, and success. It now says that I'm falling behind because there's a new one that's come out. And so now all of a sudden, now all of a sudden it doesn't say those things, yet it's the exact same scarf. And so what happens is we jump from item to item or achievement to achievement, chasing a story of achievement. But the problem is that the story that we're after is not fixed to the item. It leaps from thing to thing. And so because it leaps from thing to thing, is we're caught in this game because we're not actually able to step outside and see what's happening. And so we get caught in this race that we believe are our goals, but have actually just been inherited by a culture.
how do we, there's so much, there's so many things that we evolve out of over time.
Right.
Why don't we evolve out of things like that? Like, why do we, why do we not get better about it's like we almost get worse at status goals and that, and maybe because our basic needs are met. I don't know. I'm just, it intrigues me that we almost go in this direction of I don't know, less meaning in just life, the life part of it, not the stuff part of it, right? And so why do you think it happens that way? Like why
Because
do we
if
still
yeah, because if you ever really picked up on it, like the system is dependent on you not realizing what I just said.
yeah. Yeah, I suppose they'll
Yeah.
sell a lot less of those scarves
Right.
and
And so
cars
right
and all
now
that.
right now the thing is for the high performer is the high performer is very because the high performer feels insignificant on the inside is that they believe fundamentally that if I do this, there's certain conditions that they place on their own peace because they haven't accepted themselves as they are. And so what happens is they place these conditions on their peace and they go pursuing those conditions because they believe that if they can achieve said conditions, I can finally accept myself. My work fundamentally is about starting from the place of accepting yourself. Once you've done that, now you're actually in a good position to be of service to the world because you're very effective, you're very competent, you're very well resourced, you're very well networked, etc. Right now, you're in a position to actually ask the question: okay, what is it that I actually want? Because you're no longer living as a response to an emotional pain point like Pinocchio, where it's pulling the strings.
Where do you think where do you think people should start? I mean, in trying to unravel unravel some of this. You have, I mean,
Yep,
the obvious things of, okay, get, do some coaching with you, read the book, like those sorts of things obviously can be
yep,
helpful, but do you have maybe some starting points for people
yep,
to kind of
yep.
that are hearing this
Yep, absolutely.
like me?
So, yep. There's three fundamental pillars that one, in order to build uh, better. I use the word epistemic. Epistemic just means like human sense making. So, in order to build, I'll use the word psychological. In order to build better psychological ground for us to begin a journey, right, and a journey that is truly ours. There's three pillars that we can build it upon, right? And the first pillar is around radical honesty. So listen when you are introspecting as to whether this is really something that you want. So like even people like in coaching sessions, they'll come to me and say, I care too much about what other people think, and I'd really love to not care what people think. And I go, let's just stop for a second. Do you really actually want to go through life not caring at all what anybody thinks? And they go, well, no, that's not really what I mean. So like they just espouse things that aren't really like their voice. So radical honesty is like pillar number one. Pillar number two is around forgiveness. So as in before we start building a journey to move forward in life, let's make sure that we're not carrying anything with us. We're not carrying anything with us that could potentially create blind spots within our experience. So that executive that I gave you the example of before, so, I want to double the size of the revenue in the business so that I can prove to those people that who told me that I couldn't do it, that I can, right? Is what the problem when we don't forgive is that we get caught in these blind spots in our experience where that executive who I'm thinking of in particular, who said that to me, right, is acting out of a pattern that he is not conscious of. And so making a decision, one of the things that I do every year is I do what I call a forgiveness tour, where I write down any wrongdoing that I feel that I've done to anybody, and anything that I haven't cleared with anybody in my life. And like I did it sort of earlier this year. I had 37 people on that list. Just small things where I could have been better and I wasn't, where I didn't say thank you and I could have, where whatever. And so I make sure that my psyche always stays clear and clean. I'm not carrying stuff with me. And so that's the second piece. So radical honesty, forgiveness, and then the third is grasping the finiteness of your own life. So recognize very deeply that your life is finite, your life is arguably meaningless, and you will absolutely be forgotten. It's just a matter of how long into the future we go. Like 5 generations, 10 generations, 20, it'll be like you were never here. So there's nothing real at stake, but it has a way, the feeling of grasping at our own mortality. It's a very sobering experience because it really realigns our priorities, because we realize that we're not here forever. And so in being radically honest, in realizing that I'm not going to be here forever, and between those two things, it becomes much easier to forgive, because we realize that if my time here is very short, there might be things that I'm holding on to that are not worth their weight. Then we can actually start to move forward and to build a life that's really ours. And I'm happy to talk about how to do that as well, because there's 3 more pillars that sort of follow by way of actually moving forwards. But in terms of like building better ground, that's a great place to start.
Yeah. And yeah, I would love to hear the kind of that next steps, but I do have some questions about, and it sounds like, these 3 pillars are mainly, like when you say radical honesty, it sounds like you mean with yourself.
Yes.
Not just going out in the world and saying every thought that comes in your head. This is more like these are essentially, I mean, I feel like all internal pillars, not, which is maybe that's the whole point. But yeah, these are all like things within yourself. Even the forgiveness piece is I guess, do you go, I guess I'm thinking of, one of the 12 steps is in recovery is I forget exactly how it's termed, but like people going out and essentially apologizing, making amends with whoever they've hurt. Is it are you talking similar, or is this just kind of recognizing within yourself, these are things I want to either forgive myself or forgive others, and kind of let them go, so they're not just weighing on me for eternity?
Yeah. So normally the reason why things stay with us is because we haven't mapped out a course of conditions under which that I would forgive myself. So things that we hold against ourselves, like if I hold something against myself with let's say I've used my relationship with my dad, for example. If there's things that I hold against myself, the question would show up for me, okay, what would it actually take for you to forgive yourself? So in other words, what course of action would you take that you could execute on, that if you executed on it, you'd let yourself off the hook? And people don't often ask themselves that question, right? And so, yes, to your point, Jace, you're spot on. So it's something that you do with you. And that then clears our perceptual sort of space. It means that you won't go running into sharp objects, so to speak, because you can see clearly now.
Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. Yeah, please go on about the next 3 pillars.
Great.
I'd love
to
hear kind of where we go from here.
Okay, great. So we've forgiven we've forgiven ourselves and everyone that's hurt us. We're in touch with the finiteness of our own life, and we are radically honest with ourselves. The first place to start, by way of actually finding like deeper purpose in life, is we start with our gifts. So our gifts are the things that come easily to us. Now, my claim around gifts is like there is a misappropriation around that word, which is basically that we often think, not necessarily your listeners, but certainly people that I've worked with, there is an epistemic assumption there that my gifts are like gifts that the universe has given me, as though, these are the things that just come really easily to me, and all that sort of stuff. I would argue that your gifts are not for you. They're actually for the world. They're supposed to come through you, and they're supposed to get expressed in the world. Now, the challenge is with our gifts is that they often come so easily to us that we dismiss them, because we are also fed this idea largely through our experience in school that work is supposed to feel hard, supposed to feel like a grind, supposed to feel difficult, etc. And so our gifts are often something that is dismissed. So one of the exercises I have people do in the book, and I have my clients do as well, go and ask 10 people that you know what your gifts are, and they'll tell you. Because your gifts aren't meant for you. They're meant to serve the world. Once you've identified what those gifts are, now we turn our attention off of ourselves and we turn out to the world, right? And we're trying to identify, who can I serve with these gifts? So if we use a little bit more sort of business language, we can work out what's your niche, who is your market, etc., etc. We can label it with that sort of language. But fundamentally, the question that we're trying to answer is the gifts that I have, where can they be best served in the world, right? Once you've identified that, then the final pillar is we need a place to start. So this is like a huge problem that people fall into, in my view, my estimation, is they sit around waiting for the perfect plan. And so the rule, like one of my favorite philosophers, his name is David Whyte, Whyte. He talks about how there's three fundamental delusions that human beings live under, one to do with their past, present, and future. The one to do with their past, he says, is that I can design a life where I will never feel heartbroken again. And he says that's not true. All you can do is decide whether you're going to get heartbroken over something that is meaningful to you or not. The second, to do with our present, is he said, I can design a life where I am not vulnerable. And he said that is also a delusion, because vulnerability is an inherent part of the human condition. And then the one to do with our future is that I should be able to see from where I am all the way to the horizon, right, from where I am. And he says that that's not true. And I completely agree with him, that the future is something that presents itself to us and then hides itself. It presents itself and then hides to us. So like, even when you think about a business idea, the future gets presented to you just for a moment and then it hides itself again. And so you have to work and work and work. And then what happens is then you have a little breakthrough and the future presents itself to you again and then hides itself. And so the rule is like, don't sit around and wait to be able to see to the horizon. Put together, start from where you are, start serving people with your gifts, and trust that through that process, you'll amass a lot of feedback loops. And in those feedback loops, it will become clearer and clearer how you can serve more powerfully, what your gifts actually are, and where the next place to move is. And so if we can build our ground between forgiveness, radical honesty, and the recognition of the finiteness of our own life, then we build from there by recognizing our gifts, who we want to serve in the world with those gifts, and then identify a good place to start. We're away.
Yeah, that's great. That piece about, kind of the future, appearing and disappearing or hiding, is an interesting concept, because I agree with it 100%. It's true, and I think that actually probably holds a lot of people back, in the sense that we think that there is, and you mentioned it before with the executives they work with, the high achievers, like we set these goalposts, or these, sort of, if I achieve X, then everything else is good. But if you were to look at it, like, all of those X's are just kind of a momentary glimpse, and you don't know that that's going to be what you're actually it's not the actual goalpost when you get there. Like that makes
I would argue that it never works.
Yeah. It doesn't seem to. It's, you think, okay, I get to this place and then I will have achieved what I need to achieve. But I think that's part of being driven, is that you enjoy the pursuit of some of these achievements. And so it's and sure, some of it's in joy and some of it is driven by some of these internal things that you're trying to solve and not achieving. Where do you, do you think, how do I ask this? How do you balance being driven and actually, like, being a high achiever without having some of that, I don't know, some of the negative that seems to come with it as well, that we've been talking a lot about here. Sometimes I feel like you can use that as drive, but it sounds like you're suggesting that maybe you shouldn't have to.
Well, I think the question that often just shows up for me is, like, do you have control of it, or does it have control of you?
Yeah.
Like, absolutely. Like, it's one of the things that I'll often test with clients, is I'll say, well, why don't you just stop for 1 week? And like, I have one client in my mind who came to mind is a very successful guy in property. And one of the things that he is often caught in is speaking into other people's experience without permission. And so one of the things that I said to him is, do you have control of this, or does it have control of you? He goes, I've got control of it, definitely. And I said, okay, stop it for a week. So no speaking into anyone else's experience. He came back to me the next week and he said, that was agony. And I said, right. So like, it's obvious in some ways that his self-worth is tied up with the contributions that he attempts to make to other people. And, that he wants to feel validated through being the person who has the answers, et cetera, et cetera. But there was a small tangent. So I'll come back to your question around, so all of the, what would you call it? All of the material rewards, if you like, that high performers are often after, in my view, come as a byproduct for making a meaningful contribution to the world. You contribute powerfully to the world with your gifts, you will not have a problem by way of creating material affluence for oneself. I'm lucky. Like, I've been very lucky that I work with people who can afford to pay me well and all that sort of stuff, right? But I'm very blessed to say that I do fine, right? But the thing is that is a side effect of the mission. The mission comes first. And I think I can't remember who it is. It might be Alex or Mosey or somebody like that. It talks about like there's two different types of people in business. There's missionaries and mercenaries. And the mercenary is somebody who studies the market and tries to exploit it. The missionary is somebody who has a mission and the business becomes a means of achieving said mission. And the missionaries always end up making more money in the end.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. I do think that you controlling it versus it controlling you is I mean, maybe it goes right back to the addiction piece of how we started this conversation, and that there can be some level of addiction to success, to achievement, to getting to that next whatever it is, whatever win you may have. So I'd imagine that there's some link there as well. Wow, I mean, this I could ask you a million questions, Max. I think this is, like I said, this is a bit of a therapy session for me too. Some of this stuff is just so fascinating. I really do love the psychology behind success.
That's great. Ask that. What goes on for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, we've talked about it a lot already. I mean, I'm sure it's a lot more than that too, but I do think like it's very fascinating to hear where it comes from, and I think that it helps to explain things, because I think we tend to want answers, or at least I shouldn't say I tend to want answers. Like, I've always been, I think people get a lot of benefit out of therapy and things like that, but I sometimes feel like they're just going through the same conversations almost like over and over again every week.
Yes.
and my mind tends to say like, okay, well, when do we fix it? When do we get to the solution? When do we, whatever that there wants to be an outcome. And that's, that may be a flaw in my thinking of those sorts of things, but I've always found that like business coaching and that is maybe a better vehicle for me, because it does tend to have some of those. It has the psychology behind it, the science, but also tends to have some tangible outcome.
I guess, if that's, you speak beautifully. Like, the chokehold of any business is the owner's personal psychology, because all of the decisions of the business get filtered through their epistemology, right? And like I think you touch on something really, really powerful with, the sort of Western psychotherapy, right, as a field, is largely interested in symptom management. So they'll say, Jace, like, this is what's going on for you. Look, here are some tips, tools, and strategies that will help this not interfere with the rest of your life. But that's a very myopic way of working with people, in my view. Like I say that to clients all the time. I said, we want this over. We want this over, resolved, never coming back, almost like it was never there. Like, that's what we want. Grateful that it happened, because now I'm a better person for it, and there's nothing in me that is caught up on it at all. That's what we're going for, right? That's what we're going for. And I think it's such a profound point. Like, what do you think it says about our models of mental health, that we have more professionals than ever before, they are more qualified than ever before, and yet it is worse than ever before? Like, we're not doing it right. not in my view. And so there's a couple of reasons why, and one of them I would argue is because we we are we are largely interested. I have observed, and I'm happy to be challenged on this, but in Western psychotherapy, we are largely interested in like re-engineering meaning about what the past meant to us, right? And I would argue that a far better approach is to say, okay, the past is the past, right? And we can't change it. But what we can ask is we can ask future-based questions that we can work towards. So like the forgiveness one is a classic, right? So it's like, rather than us like diving into your history and trying to sort of re-engineer what happened and dredge it all up and have you crying on a couch, let's ask a different question. Now moving forward, what would I need to do moving forward so that I could forgive myself? What are the unclosed loops? So, and everything is sort of future focused. It's moving towards what I want rather than away from what I don't. And I think that gives us much more solid footing to actually start to work towards a permanent solution. And the last thing I'll just say is this: like, there's three like main thought leaders within Western psychotherapy. So you have Carl Jung, you have Freud, and you have Alfred Adler. And Jung and Freud basically largely had the same structural idea, which basically explained the human condition through a chain of causation. So they'd say, Jace, the reason why you struggle with anger is because when you were 5, this happened, and 7, this happened, and 10, this happened, and whatever. Alfred Adler is a really interesting thought leader within Western psychotherapy because he disagrees with those two and looks at it from a place of effect first rather than cause. So basically what that means is, say with the anger example, he would say, Jace, the reason that you're angry is not because of what happened to you when you were young, but because you getting angry serves a need for you in the present. And if we can identify what need is that serving you, right? What need that is serving for you, then we can start to undo it. So let me give you an example. So Adler would argue that you are choosing to feel angry, right? Because it serves a need for you in the present. Now, if I ran that through, like I'll use myself as an example here. So let's say I've got this challenge with my dad, right? Around my relationship with my dad. So per Adler, what that would mean is I'm choosing to feel this way. And I would, like, the first instinct that shows up for me is like, why on earth would I be choosing to feel this way? But if I investigated a little bit more closely, I would say, okay, if I was choosing to feel this way and hang on to those experiences, why would I be choosing to do that? Maybe it's because if my life ever went catastrophically wrong, I would have a way of explaining why that is or why that happened. Because if I really let this go, then I'm free, but I'm also now fully responsible. So anything that now happens, so
it's all on you at that point,
right? Yeah. So anything that now happens is now on me, totally and completely. And so maybe the reason that I'm choosing to hang on to it is because it's like a security blanket. If something really went wrong in my life, I would always have a way of explaining it.
Yeah.
And so. I tend to agree with you. I don't think our models of mental health are particularly effective.
Yeah, that is that's a fast, because I don't, well, I guess at least don't consciously tend to hold on to things. I don't like to stay angry, or I like to move on. I like solution. I like to move on, which maybe sometimes means that you ignore things and they get internalized and whatever. So I don't know that it's always the best way. That I'm not saying that I handle it the best way, but I am always fascinated by people tend to either be one way or the other, right? Like they just kind of let things slide off, or they hold on to things a lot. And I never really thought about, I always wondered why, but that's actually like a pretty good explanation for why that might be, is why we would hold on to these things that and sort of let them continue to hurt us because it gives you an out, right? It gives you that, whether that's, growing up in addiction or an abusive relationship that you might like. There's a reason why things aren't the way that you think they should be, but
Yes.
but that reason doesn't happen to be you.
Yes, and it is less painful for me if it doesn't have something to do with me.
Yeah, that's fascinating. That is a a really fascinating concept to kind of. I'm gonna think about that a lot and like apply it in different places and just kind of think from that lens. But well, Max, like I said, this stuff's fascinating, but we'll wrap up so I don't take your whole day. The name of the show is Know Your Why, and we've talked a lot about I think, again, like the psychology behind people's success versus struggle, and maybe a lot of it is intertwined. But I want to ask you, sort of what is your why? What's it's interesting. It's an interesting question to, especially from someone who seems to have a real understanding of like the way the mind works and the way people look at things. And so what is your why and kind of driving you at this point in your career?
I have often been in this question of what is a human being's highest potential? Like, what is like the ultimate pursuit that we are all after? And the answer that comes to me through my journey is selflessness. They are the people that we herald mythologically, historically, cross-culturally, is human beings who are deeply selfless and who are of powerful service to the world. And I think if I look back at my life and the pain that I was blessed / unlucky to go through, it's one of the most counterintuitive pieces of wisdom in my view, that if you want a better life, stop thinking about you. And so my why is to help as many people as I can wake up to that for themselves.
I love that. I think that's very, very powerful. And I, as you're saying it, thinking of all the examples, the examples of people that are throughout history, really considered selfless, and those are truly the heroes, the aspirational beings that we would like to follow. So that's amazing. Max, when people hear this and they want to connect with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
Yeah, absolutely. They can just go to my website. So Max Stevens spelled with a PH. So maxstevenscoaching.com. And they can book a call. It's free. And I'm happy to spend time with you guys. So thank you again for having me, Jace.
Yeah, no, thanks for being on. I mean, we'll get all that. We'll get your website in the show notes so people can connect with you. I truly enjoyed this conversation, and I appreciate everything that you shared today. It's been a great conversation. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you too, man.
Yeah, and folks listening, make sure you connect with Max. Check out his website. Please like, rate, and review the show so we can continue to get more great guests and have these types of conversations. Thank you all for listening.
Hey there, I am Dr. Jason Balara, and this is the Know Your Why podcast, where we explore the why behind success. Every week, I meet with real estate investors, veterinary entrepreneurs, mindset coaches, authors, and fitness professionals to uncover their why and how it drives them on the winding road to success. What is your why?